The dust from the morning stage had barely settled when Clarissa Harper walked into the little church on the edge of Shoshone City, Idaho. Her worn calico dress doing nothing to hide the gentle swell of her belly beneath the fabric. The year was 1879, and the late summer heat pressed down on the mining town like a heavy blanket. But the cold stares that greeted her when she stepped through those wooden doors cut far deeper than any weather ever could. She had come seeking salvation, seeking a chance to make things right, but Reverend Michaels took one long look at her condition, and his face hardened into something resembling granite. "You wish to marry?" the Reverend asked, his voice echoing in the empty church. Behind him, the simple wooden cross cast long shadows across the floor. "Yes, sir," Clarissa said quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Jacob Wilson said he would do right by me. He is waiting outside." The Reverend's mouth twisted into a grimace. "I have heard about you, Miss Harper. The entire town knows your story. Your father drinks away his wages at the saloon. Your mother passed from fever 2 winters back. And now you come to me in this condition, expecting the sanctity of marriage." Clarissa felt the heat rising to her cheeks, but she kept her chin up. "I made a mistake, Reverend, but Jacob wants to marry me. We want to start fresh." "A mistake?" The Reverend's voice rose, bouncing off the rough-hewn walls. "You have disgraced yourself and brought shame upon this community. I will not sully the sacred bonds of matrimony by joining 2 people who have already demonstrated such moral weakness. You are unfit to marry in the eyes of God and this church." The words struck her like physical blows. Clarissa felt her legs weaken, felt the tears threatening to spill over. Behind her, she heard the door creak open, heard boots on the floorboards. She thought perhaps it was Jacob, come to defend her, but when she turned, she saw a different man entirely. Thaddeus Parker was not a man most people crossed. He stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders earned from years of working cattle across the high desert plains that surrounded Shoshone City. His ranch, the Twin Pines Spread, was one of the most successful operations in the territory, and at 28 years old he had built it from nothing but grit and determination. He had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to take in everything at once. He had come to town for supplies, had tied his horse outside the general store, when he heard the raised voices coming from the church. Now he stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, and he had heard every word the Reverend had spoken. "Reverend Michaels," Thaddeus said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made the older man pause. "I could not help but overhear your conversation." "This is a private matter, Mr. Parker," the Reverend said stiffly. "It stopped being private when you raised your voice loud enough for half the street to hear," Thaddeus replied. He stepped further into the church, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. His eyes fell on Clarissa, taking in her pale face, the way her hands trembled slightly, the defiant tilt of her chin despite the tears in her eyes. Something in his chest tightened. He had seen her around town before, of course. Shoshone City was not so large that people did not know each other by sight if not by name. He knew her father drank, knew her mother had died, knew that Clarissa worked hard cleaning houses and taking in laundry to keep food on their table. He had always thought she had kind eyes and a gentle way about her, but he had never spoken to her directly. He was too busy with the ranch, too focused on building something lasting in this hard country. "The lady asked you to perform a marriage," Thaddeus continued, "and you have refused." "I have every right to refuse," the Reverend said, drawing himself up. "She is with child out of wedlock. She has sinned, and I will not condone it by blessing such a union." "Where is the man?" Thaddeus asked, looking around. "This Jacob Wilson," Clarissa's voice was barely a whisper. "He left." When the Reverend started shouting, he just turned and walked away. I heard his horse a moment later. The silence that followed was deafening. Thaddeus felt anger kindle in his gut, hot and bright. What kind of man abandoned a woman carrying his child? What kind of coward ran when things got difficult? So he has left her to face this alone, Thaddeus said flatly. And you, Reverend, are adding to her burden by casting judgment instead of offering grace. Mr. Parker, I hardly think you understand the complexities of spiritual matters, the Reverend began. I understand that Christ ate with sinners and tax collectors, Thaddeus interrupted. I understand that he said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." I may not be a scholar of Scripture, but I remember those lessons from my mother well enough. The Reverend's face flushed red. This is highly irregular. The girl has demonstrated poor judgment and loose morals. The girl, Thaddeus said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, is standing right here and has a name. And she came seeking help, seeking to do the right thing, and you have turned her away. He looked at Clarissa again, really looked at her. She was probably 20 or 21, he guessed, with auburn hair that caught the light filtering through the church windows and eyes the color of honey. She was not the prettiest girl in town, perhaps, but there was something about her that called to him. Perhaps it was the strength he saw in the way she held herself despite everything, or perhaps it was simply that he recognized a kindred spirit, someone who knew what it meant to struggle and survive. "Miss Harper," he said, addressing her directly for the first time, "do you have somewhere to go?" "Family who will take you in," she shook her head slowly. "My father said he would not have me in the house if I was carrying a bastard. He said I brought shame on our family name." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound, as if the Harper name was something worth protecting. Thaddeus made a decision in that moment, one that would change both their lives forever. He had been alone at the Twin Pine for 3 years now, ever since his parents had died within months of each other, his father from a riding accident and his mother from heartbreak. The ranch hands respected him, but the big house was empty and quiet, and sometimes the loneliness ate at him like acid. He had thought about finding a wife, but the few eligible women in town were either already spoken for or interested in him only for his money and land. But here was a woman in desperate need, and here was a chance to do something good, something right. And if he was honest with himself, there was something about Clarissa Harper that made him want to know her better, made him want to be the one to put light back in her eyes. "Then I will take her," Thaddeus said, his voice ringing clear in the church. "Today. Right now. Reverend, you will marry us, or I will ride to Boise and find someone who will, and I will make sure every person in this territory knows that you turned away a woman in need." The Reverend stared at him, mouth agape. Clarissa turned to face him fully, her eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Parker, you cannot be serious," the Reverend sputtered. "You do not even know this woman, and she is carrying another man's child." "I am perfectly serious," Thaddeus said. He turned to Clarissa. "Miss Harper, I am offering you marriage and protection, a home at my ranch, safety for you and your child. I will not lie and say I know you well, or that I love you in the romantic sense, but I respect you enough to offer you this choice. You do not have to accept. But if you do, I promise you I will be a good husband and a father to your baby." Clarissa felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. This man, this rancher she had only seen from a distance, was offering her everything she needed. It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. She searched his face for signs of cruelty or ulterior motives, but all she saw was sincerity and a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had in months. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Thaddeus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because you deserve better than what you have been given. And because I think we could make a good partnership, you and I need someone to help run the household at the ranch, and you need a home. Beyond that, well, we will figure it out as we go." She could have cried at the simple kindness in his words. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The Reverend tried to protest further, but Thaddeus cut him off with a look that could freeze water in summer. "You will perform the ceremony, Reverend, or I will see to it that your position here becomes very uncomfortable. The town council includes several men who owe me favors." It was not a threat Thaddeus enjoyed making, but he meant every word. The Reverend seemed to realize he had been beaten. With visible reluctance, he opened his Bible and gestured for them to stand before him. The ceremony was brief and perfunctory, lacking any warmth or joy that should have accompanied such an occasion. The Reverend rushed through the words as if they burned his tongue. There were no witnesses except the empty pews and the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. When it came time for Thaddeus to place a ring on Clarissa's finger, he realized he had none. Without hesitation, he removed the silver band his father had worn, a simple thing engraved with the Parker family crest, and slipped it onto her hand. It was too large, but she closed her fist around it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the Reverend said quickly, snapping the Bible shut. "May God have mercy on you both." "We will not need mercy," Thaddeus said quietly. "But thank you for your concern." He offered Clarissa his arm, and together they walked out of the church into the bright Idaho sunshine. Main Street stretched before them, dusty and wide, lined with false-fronted buildings that housed the general store, the saloon, the assay office, and all the other establishments that made Shoshone City function. A few people had gathered, drawn by the commotion, and Clarissa felt their stares like brands on her skin. "My horse is tied at the general store," Thaddeus said. "Do you have belongings to collect?" "Just a small bag at the boarding house," Clarissa said. "Mrs. Whitmore let me stay there in exchange for helping with the cooking and cleaning. I do not have much." "We will get your bag and then head to the ranch," Thaddeus said. He paused, looking down at her. "Are you hungry? When did you last eat?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, nearly undid her. "Yesterday evening," she admitted. His jaw tightened. "Then we will stop by the restaurant first. You need food and we should talk, really talk about what happens next." The restaurant was a small establishment run by a Chinese couple, the Chens, who had come to Idaho during the gold rush and stayed to feed the miners and ranchers. They served simple but hearty food, and Thaddeus was a regular customer. Mrs. Chen greeted him with a warm smile that faltered only slightly when she saw Clarissa on his arm. "Table for two, Mr. Parker," she asked. "Please, Mrs. Chen, and we would like some of your beef stew and fresh bread if you have it." They settled at a table near the window, and Clarissa realized she had no idea what to say to this man who was now her husband. He had saved her, yes, but what did he expect in return? The question must have shown on her face because Thaddeus leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "I want you to understand something," he said quietly. "This marriage, it is real in the eyes of the law and the church, but I do not expect anything from you that you are not willing to give. You will have your own room at the ranch house. I will not force myself on you or make demands. We are partners, and I hope in time we can be friends, but I will not take advantage of you." The relief that flooded through Clarissa was so intense she felt dizzy. "Thank you," she managed. "I was afraid that you might expect me to be a wife in all ways immediately." "You are carrying a child," Thaddeus said gently. "You need rest and care, not more complications. And besides, I meant what I said. I want this to be a partnership built on mutual respect. Anything beyond that will only happen if and when we both want it. Mrs. Chen brought the food then, steaming bowls of rich beef stew thick with vegetables and chunks of tender meat, accompanied by slabs of warm bread slathered with butter. Clarissa ate like she was starving, because she was, and Thaddeus watched with satisfaction as color returned to her cheeks. "Tell me about yourself," he said after a while. "Beyond what I already know, what do you like? What are your dreams?" It had been so long since anyone had asked her about her dreams that Clarissa had to think about it. "I like reading," she said finally. "Before my mother died, she taught me to read from the Bible and a few books she had brought from Ohio. I love stories about faraway places, and I like gardening, growing things. My mother and I used to keep a small vegetable patch behind our house." "There is plenty of space for a garden at the ranch," Thaddeus said, "and I have books, not many but a few. You are welcome to them, and we can order more from Boise if you like." "You like to read?" Clarissa asked, surprised. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father," Thaddeus explained. "She made sure I was educated, even out here in the wilderness. She said a man should be able to think as well as work." They talked for over an hour, sharing stories and small details about their lives. Clarissa learned that Thaddeus had come to Idaho as a boy of 12, that his parents had staked a claim and built the ranch from nothing. She learned that he loved the land, loved the work despite how hard it was, and that he dreamed of building something lasting, a legacy that would endure. In turn, she shared her own history, the slow decline of her family after her mother's death, her father's drinking, the desperate circumstances that had led to her involvement with Jacob Wilson. "He said he loved me," she said quietly, staring into her empty bowl. "He said we would be married as soon as he saved enough money. I believed him. I was foolish." "You were trusting," Thaddeus corrected. "That is not the same as foolish. He was the one who failed, not you." The words eased something tight in her chest. By the time they left the restaurant, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. They collected Clarissa's meager belongings from the boarding house, where Mrs. Whitmore sniffed disapprovingly but said nothing, and then Thaddeus helped her up onto his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper. She sat sideways in front of him, her small bag clutched in her lap, and tried not to think about how close his body was to hers, how safe she felt with his arms on either side as he held the reins. The ride to the Twin Pine Ranch took about 45 minutes. They followed the main road out of Shoshone City, and then turned onto a smaller track that wound through sage-covered hills and stands of pine trees. The land here was beautiful in a stark way, all golden grasses and dark green pines against the endless blue sky. Clarissa could see mountains in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the late summer heat. "The ranch is just over this rise," Thaddeus said, and she heard the pride in his voice. When they crested the hill, she caught her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The ranch house was built of logs, solid and square, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see flower boxes beneath the windows, though whatever had been planted in them had long since died from neglect. Beyond the house were several outbuildings including a large barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and what looked like a smokehouse. Cattle dotted the distant fields, dark shapes against the golden grass. "It is not fancy," Thaddeus said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice, "but it is sturdy and warm. I built most of it myself with my father." "It is wonderful," Clarissa said honestly. "It is more than I ever hoped for." Two men emerged from the barn as they approached, both dressed in worn work clothes and wide-brimmed hats. One was older, probably in his 50s, with a grizzled beard and weathered face. The other was younger, maybe in his early 20s, tall and lean with sandy hair. "Boss, you are back early," the older man called. Then he noticed Clarissa and his eyes widened. "And you brought a guest." "Not a guest, Marcus," Thaddeus said as he dismounted and then carefully lifted Clarissa down. "My wife. We were married this afternoon in town." The two ranch hands stared in obvious shock. The younger one actually removed his hat and rubbed his eyes as if he might be seeing things. "Your wife." Marcus repeated, "But boss, you did not say anything about courting anyone." "It was sudden," Thaddeus admitted. He kept a protective hand on Clarissa's back. "Marcus and James, this is Clarissa Parker. Clarissa, these are my ranch hands. Marcus has been with us since my father's time, and James came on about 2 years ago. They live in the bunkhouse and help run the operation." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Marcus said, recovering from his surprise enough to offer a respectful nod. James followed suit, though he still looked bewildered. "I know this is unexpected," Thaddeus continued, "but I expect you both to treat my wife with respect and courtesy. She will be running the household, and any concerns you have should come through me." "Of course, boss," Marcus said quickly. "We would not dream of being disrespectful." Thaddeus led Clarissa into the house, and she stepped into what would be her new life. The interior was as solid as the exterior, with wide plank floors and exposed beam ceilings. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, clearly built by hand. Everything was clean but had the bare, unlived-in quality of a place maintained by men who saw it only as a place to sleep and eat. "There are 3 bedrooms," Thaddeus explained, gesturing to doors leading off the main room. "The largest was my parents'. I sleep in the second. The third is smaller, but it has a good window and gets morning light. I thought you might like that one." He showed her to the room, which was indeed small but pleasant. It held a simple bed, a dresser, a chair by the window, and little else. The window looked out over the valley, and she could see the sun beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I will bring in more furniture," Thaddeus said. "Whatever you need to be comfortable. And tomorrow I will ride into town and get supplies, fabric if you want to make curtains, anything else you might want." "It is perfect," Clarissa said. She set her small bag on the bed and turned to face him. "Thaddeus, I do not know how to thank you. You have given me so much." He shook his head. "You do not need to thank me. We are partners now, remember. What is mine is yours." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Clarissa felt something shift between them, some acknowledgement that they were bound together now for better or worse. Then Thaddeus cleared his throat and stepped back. "I will let you settle in," he said. "Rest if you need to. I have to check on the cattle before dark, but I will be back in time for supper. Do you feel up to cooking, or should I ask Marcus to make something?" "I can cook," Clarissa said quickly. "I want to earn my keep." "This is your home, not a job," Thaddeus said gently. "But if you want to cook, the kitchen is yours. There is salted pork in the cold cellar, potatoes, beans, flour. Make whatever sounds good to you." After he left, Clarissa stood in the middle of her new room and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been desperate and alone, facing public shame and homelessness. Now she was a married woman, the wife of a successful rancher, with a roof over her head and food in the larder. It seemed impossible, like a fairy tale, except fairy tales did not include babies born out of wedlock or the very real fear that this could all be taken away. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the slight curve there. The baby was due in about 4 months, she calculated, sometime in late December or early January. What would happen then? Would Thaddeus still want her and the child around? Would he grow to resent the burden he had taken on? She pushed the worries aside. For now, she had this moment, this chance, and she would make the most of it. She unpacked her few belongings and then made her way to the kitchen. The cold cellar was accessed through a trapdoor in the floor, and she climbed down carefully to find it well stocked with preserved foods, smoked meat, and vegetables. She selected what she needed and began preparing a meal. Cooking in this kitchen felt different than the cramped, dirty spaces she had worked in before. Everything was clean and well organized, and she had plenty of ingredients to work with. She made fried potatoes with onions, cooked beans with bits of salt pork, and even managed to whip up a simple apple cake using dried apples she found in a tin. The work was soothing, familiar, and by the time Thaddeus returned with Marcus and James, the house smelled of food and warmth. "Something smells amazing," James said as they came through the door. He stopped when he saw the table set with plates and food. "Is that apple cake?" "It is," Clarissa said, feeling a flutter of nervousness. "I hope you all like it." "Like it," Marcus said, sitting down heavily. "Madam, we have been eating our own terrible cooking for 3 years. This looks like a feast." They ate together, the 4 of them, and the men were effusive in their praise. Clarissa felt herself relaxing bit by bit, joining in the conversation as they talked about the ranch, the cattle, the plans for the coming winter. Thaddeus watched her with an expression she could not quite read, something soft and approving that made her feel warm. After dinner, Marcus and James returned to the bunkhouse, and Clarissa cleaned up the dishes while Thaddeus checked the fire and locked the doors. The domesticity of it all felt strange and wonderful. When she finished, she found him standing on the porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. "It is beautiful here," she said, joining him. "It is," he agreed, "especially at night. You can see every star out here away from the town lights." They stood in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the pines. "Thaddeus," Clarissa said finally, "what do we tell people? About the baby, I mean. People in town know I was pregnant before we married." "We tell them the truth," Thaddeus said firmly, "that the baby is not mine by blood, but it will be mine in every other way that matters. Let people talk if they want. They will grow tired of it eventually." "You really mean to raise my child as your own?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were serious. "I meant everything I said today, Clarissa. Every word. The child will have my name and my protection. I will be a father indeed, if not in blood." The tears she had been holding back all day finally spilled over. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking, and then she felt Thaddeus's arms come around her, steady and strong. He did not say anything, just held her while she cried out all the fear and relief and gratitude that had built up inside her. "I am sorry," she said when she finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "I do not usually cry like that." "You have been through an ordeal," Thaddeus said. "You are allowed to cry." That night, Clarissa lay in her small bed in her small room and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. She heard Thaddeus moving around in his own room, heard the creak of his bed as he settled in for the night. She felt the baby flutter inside her, a small reminder of her situation. But for the first time in months, she felt something like hope. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clarissa woke early and made breakfast for Thaddeus and the ranch hands. After they rode out to work the cattle and tend the land, she cleaned the house and began putting her own stamp on it. She made curtains from fabric Thaddeus brought from town, planted late-season vegetables in a plot near the house, and reorganized the kitchen to be more efficient. The physical work was tiring, especially with the baby growing inside her, but it felt good to be useful, to be building something. Thaddeus was kind and considerate, always asking after her health and making sure she did not overwork herself. In the evenings after dinner, they would sit by the fire and talk. He told her about his childhood, about coming west with his parents and learning to work the land. She told him about her mother, about the books they had read together, about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday. They were learning each other, building a foundation of friendship that surprised them both with its ease. Marcus and James warmed to her quickly. Marcus especially seemed delighted to have a woman around the ranch again. "Reminds me of when Mr. Parker's mother was alive," he said one day while helping her carry water from the well. "She was a fine woman, always had a kind word for everyone. You have that same way about you, madam. Please call me Clarissa," she said. "Madam makes me feel old." "You are the boss's wife," Marcus said with a shake of his head. "It would not be proper, but if you prefer Mrs. Parker, I can do that." "Mrs. Parker," Clarissa repeated, testing the name. It still felt strange, but in a good way. She was Mrs. Parker now, the wife of Thaddeus Parker, and she had a home and a future. It was more than she had dared hope for. About 2 weeks after the wedding, Clarissa was in the kitchen making bread when she heard the sound of an approaching horse. She wiped the flour from her hands and went to the window, her heart sinking when she saw her father riding up to the house. Thomas Harper was a broken man, aged beyond his 50 years by drink and disappointment. He dismounted clumsily and swayed toward the door. Clarissa met him on the porch, her arms crossed. "What do you want, Pa?" "That is any way to greet your father," Thomas slurred. "I heard you up and married the Parker boy. Thought you might have some money to spare for your old Pa." "You threw me out," Clarissa said, her voice hard. "You said I brought shame on the family and that you would not have me in your house." "Well, I was angry," Thomas said, waving his hand dismissively. "But you are my daughter. You should take care of me. That is how it works. And since you married a rich rancher, you can afford to help your old Pa out." "No," Clarissa said simply. "I will not give you money to drink away. You made your choice and I have made mine." Thomas's face darkened. "You ungrateful girl. After everything I did for you, raising you, keeping a roof over your head." "Ma did that," Clarissa shot back. "You did nothing but drink and feel sorry for yourself after she died. I took care of myself, Pa. I always have." "You owe me," Thomas growled, lurching toward her. "You are my daughter, and you will do as I say." He reached for her arm, but before he could grab her, Thaddeus appeared from around the side of the house. He must have seen the horse approaching and come to investigate. His presence was like a storm front moving in, all controlled power and barely restrained anger. "You will take your hands off my wife," Thaddeus said, his voice low and dangerous. "And you will leave this property immediately." Thomas straightened up, trying to appear more sober than he was. "This is between me and my daughter." "She is not your daughter anymore," Thaddeus said. "She is my wife and you have no claim on her. She told you no. That is the end of the discussion. Now leave before I throw you off my land." Thomas looked between them, seeming to calculate his chances. He must have decided he did not like the odds because he spat on the ground and turned back to his horse. "You will regret this," he called over his shoulder. "Both of you." They watched him ride away, and Clarissa realized she was shaking. Thaddeus put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though her voice wavered. "I should have expected him to come looking for money. I am sorry you had to deal with that." "You have nothing to apologize for," Thaddeus said firmly. "He is the one who should be ashamed. What kind of father throws out his daughter when she needs him most?" "The kind who drinks himself senseless every night," Clarissa said bitterly. "I am well rid of him." But the encounter shook her more than she wanted to admit. That night she was quiet during dinner, picking at her food. Thaddeus noticed, of course, because he seemed to notice everything about her. "Talk to me," he said after Marcus and James had left. "What is on your mind?" "I keep thinking about what he said," Clarissa admitted. "About regretting this. What if he is right? What if you do come to regret taking me in? I come with so much baggage, Thaddeus. The baby, my father, my reputation. You could have married someone respectable, someone who would not bring shame to your name." Thaddeus set down his fork and looked at her intently. "Clarissa, listen to me. I do not regret marrying you, not for 1 second. Yes, the circumstances were unusual, but I have not been this happy in years. The house feels like a home again. I look forward to coming in for meals and seeing you there. I enjoy our conversations in the evening. You have brought life back to this place." "Really?" she asked, her voice small. "Really," he confirmed. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her skin. "I meant what I said in the church that day. We are partners. And I think, if we keep going the way we are, we could be more than that. We could be friends, maybe even more than friends someday." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her. She had been so focused on surviving, on finding safety, that she had not allowed herself to think about the fact that Thaddeus was an attractive man, kind and strong, and everything she had once dreamed of in a husband. She had not let herself consider that she might come to care for him as more than just her rescuer. "I would like that," she whispered. They sat there holding hands across the table, and something shifted between them again, some deepening of the connection that had been growing since that first day in the church. As autumn settled over the Idaho high desert, Clarissa blossomed despite her advancing pregnancy. The morning sickness that had plagued her earlier had faded, and she had energy to spare. She threw herself into improving the ranch house, making it more comfortable and homey. She sewed new cushions for the chairs, made braided rugs for the floors, and even convinced Thaddeus to let her paint the kitchen a cheerful yellow. "My mother always wanted a yellow kitchen," he said, watching her work with a smile. "She said it was like having sunshine even on cloudy days." She was right, Clarissa said, standing back to admire her handiwork. The paint had been expensive, ordered special from Boise, but Thaddeus had not hesitated to buy it for her. He was generous with her, she had discovered, not just with money but with his time and attention. He taught her to ride on a gentle mare named Daisy, taking her on slow tours of the ranch property. He showed her where the best fishing spots were along the creek that ran through the southern pasture, and where wild berries grew in the summer. He shared his dreams for the ranch, for expanding the cattle operation and maybe adding horses in a few years. "I want to build something lasting," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Something that will endure after I am gone. A legacy." "You already have that," Clarissa said. "Look at what you have built here. It is remarkable." "It will be better with you here," Thaddeus said. He hesitated, then added, "I have been thinking. After the baby comes, would you want more children? My children, I mean." The question made her heart skip. "Are you asking if I would want to have children with you?" "Eventually, yes," Thaddeus said. His ears had gone slightly red, which she found endearing. "I know we did not marry for love, but I have come to care for you, Clarissa, more than I expected to. And I hope that maybe you feel the same." "I do," she admitted. "I care for you, Thaddeus. You have been so kind to me, so patient. You gave me back my life when I thought I had lost everything. How could I not care for you?" "That is gratitude," Thaddeus said. "I am talking about something different. I am talking about affection, maybe even the beginnings of love." Clarissa turned to look at him fully. His face was serious but open, vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen from him. "I feel that too," she said softly. "The affection, I mean. And I think it could grow into love given time." "Then we have time," Thaddeus said. He took her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "All the time in the world. The first snow came in late November, dusting the high peaks and turning the world crystalline and magical. Clarissa stood at the kitchen window watching the flakes fall, one hand on her belly where the baby was doing somersaults. She was big now, round and ungainly, but Thaddeus still looked at her like she was beautiful. He insisted she rest more, took over many of the household chores despite her protests, and worried constantly about her health. "The baby is moving a lot today," she said when he came in from checking on the cattle. "Feel." She took his hand and placed it on her belly, and his eyes widened when he felt the strong kick against his palm. "That is incredible," he breathed. "Strong little thing, isn't it? Keeps me up half the night," Clarissa said with a rueful smile. "I think the baby is training to be a prizefighter." Thaddeus laughed, but his expression grew serious. "Clarissa, I want to talk to you about something. When the baby comes, I want to claim it as mine legally. I want my name on the birth certificate as the father. That way, there will never be any question about the child's legitimacy." "You would do that?" Clarissa asked, her throat tight with emotion. "I would," Thaddeus said firmly. "In my heart, this baby is already mine. The law should reflect that." She threw her arms around him as much as her belly would allow, and he held her close. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything. I do not know what I did to deserve you." "You do not have to deserve kindness," Thaddeus said into her hair. "You just have to be you." That night, for the first time since their marriage, Thaddeus kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, just a brief press of lips, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When he pulled back, his eyes were searching. "Was that all right?" he asked. "Yes," Clarissa said, smiling. "It was more than all right." "Good," Thaddeus said. "Because I have wanted to do that for weeks now." They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and Clarissa felt her heart opening up in ways she had thought impossible. She had been so hurt by Jacob's betrayal, so convinced that she would never trust a man again. But Thaddeus was different. He proved his worth not with words but with actions, day after day, choice after choice. Winter settled in earnest as December arrived. The ranch slowed down during the cold months, with less work to be done outside and more time spent indoors maintaining equipment and planning for spring. Thaddeus used the time to add on to the house, building a small nursery adjacent to Clarissa's room. He made a cradle with his own hands, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk, and Clarissa sewed tiny gowns and blankets from soft flannel. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly, just the four of them. Clarissa made a feast of roasted chicken, potatoes, and a dried apple pie that made Marcus declare it the best thing he had ever tasted. Thaddeus gave her a beautiful leather-bound book, a collection of poems by Walt Whitman, and she gave him a new shirt she had sewn, embroidered with his initials on the cuff. It was modest as gifts went, but it felt precious because of what it represented. A life being built together, brick by brick and moment by moment. The baby came on a frigid January night when the world outside was frozen and silent. Clarissa had been feeling strange all day, restless and achy, but she had not wanted to worry Thaddeus. It was not until her water broke during dinner that she realized the time had come. "Thaddeus," she said calmly, though her heart was racing, "I think the baby is coming." He went pale, then sprang into action. Marcus was sent racing to town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, while Thaddeus helped Clarissa to the bedroom and tried not to panic. James boiled water and gathered clean linens, looking terrified the entire time. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Mrs. Henderson arrived around midnight, took one look at Clarissa, and declared that it would be a while yet. Thaddeus refused to leave Clarissa's side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, and murmuring encouragement even though he had no idea what he was doing. "You are doing beautifully," he told her during one particularly bad contraction. "You are the strongest person I know." "I do not feel strong," Clarissa gasped. "I feel like I am being torn in half." "That is what strength is," Thaddeus said, "enduring even when it hurts." Finally, as the winter sun was rising over the mountains, the baby entered the world with a loud, indignant cry. Mrs. Henderson cleaned the infant and wrapped it in a soft blanket before placing it in Clarissa's arms. "It is a boy," she announced. "A big, healthy boy." Clarissa looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant and felt her heart expand beyond measure. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. She counted his fingers and toes, examined his perfect little ears, and wept with relief and love. "He is beautiful," Thaddeus said, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out tentatively and touched the baby's cheek with one finger. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Clarissa asked. Thaddeus looked terrified but nodded. Clarissa transferred the baby to his arms, showing him how to support the head, and watched as this strong, capable man transformed into something tender and awed. He looked down at the baby with an expression of such pure love that Clarissa knew, beyond any doubt, that he meant every promise he had made. "Hello, little one," Thaddeus said softly. "Welcome home. I am your father and I am going to take care of you always." The baby stopped crying and seemed to focus on Thaddeus's face, and Clarissa could have sworn she saw recognition there, some understanding passing between them. "What should we name him?" Thaddeus asked. They had discussed names, but Clarissa suddenly knew what felt right. "I want to name him after your father," she said. "If that is all right with you." Thaddeus looked up at her, his eyes shining. "My father's name was William." "Then William Parker he shall be," Clarissa said. "William Thaddeus Parker." "William Thaddeus Parker," Thaddeus repeated, testing it out. "That is a strong name. A good name." Mrs. Henderson bustled around, cleaning up and checking on Clarissa, declaring that mother and baby were both healthy despite the long labor. She stayed for a few hours to make sure everything was stable, then left with instructions to send for her if there were any problems. The house settled into a new rhythm with the baby. William was a good baby, only fussing when he was hungry or needed changing, but he still demanded constant attention. Clarissa was exhausted but happier than she could remember being. Thaddeus was utterly devoted to his new son, taking every opportunity to hold him, talking to him constantly, even though the baby could not possibly understand. "You are going to be a rancher like your old man," Thaddeus told William one evening as he walked the floor with the baby. "I will teach you to ride and rope and how to care for the land. But first, your mother is going to teach you to read and write, because education matters just as much as hard work." Clarissa watched from the rocking chair, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was not the life she had planned, not the way she had imagined things would go, but it was better than anything she could have dreamed up on her own. As winter gave way to spring, William grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby who charmed everyone he met. Marcus and James were utterly besotted, competing to make him laugh. Even the gruff cowboys who came through to help with spring roundup turned into cooing fools around the baby. Clarissa regained her strength slowly, and with it came a new confidence. She was a mother now, and a wife, and she had found a place where she belonged. The shame and fear that had haunted her were fading, replaced by something solid and real. One warm April evening, after they had put William to bed in his cradle, Thaddeus and Clarissa sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. She was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Clarissa," Thaddeus said quietly. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" she asked, looking up at him. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you for a while now, but I wanted to wait until the time felt right to say it. I love you, not out of duty or obligation, but because you have become essential to me. You and William, you are my family, my heart. I cannot imagine my life without you." Clarissa felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she said. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day in the church when you stood up for me. You were my hero then, and you are still my hero now. But you are also my partner, my friend, and the man I want to spend the rest of my life with." Thaddeus cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. It was a kiss full of promise and passion, of commitment and devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I want you to be my wife in every sense," Thaddeus said. "If you are ready, if you want that too." "I do," Clarissa said. "I want to be your wife completely. I want to share your bed and your life and build a future together." That night, their marriage became complete in every way. Thaddeus was gentle and patient, taking his time to learn what she liked, to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Clarissa had never experienced such tenderness, such care. With Jacob, it had been rushed and furtive, tinged with shame. With Thaddeus, it was beautiful and right, an expression of the love they shared. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Thaddeus's bed, which was now their bed, and talked late into the night about their hopes and dreams. They wanted more children, they decided, brothers and sisters for William. They wanted to expand the ranch, maybe build a school in town someday so that all children could get an education. They wanted to grow old together, watching their children and grandchildren fill the house with life and laughter. "I cannot believe how lucky I am," Clarissa said, tracing patterns on Thaddeus's chest. "6 months ago I thought my life was over. Now I have everything I ever wanted." "We are both lucky," Thaddeus said, kissing the top of her head. "I was so lonely before you came, Clarissa. I did not even realize how lonely until suddenly I was not anymore. You filled a space in my life I did not know was empty." "We found each other," Clarissa said. "That is all that matters." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered and the Parker family grew. A year after William was born, Clarissa gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine Rose, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas Jacob, whom they called TJ. The house rang with the sound of children laughing and playing, and Clarissa's garden flourished, providing vegetables for the family and the ranch hands. Clarissa became a respected member of the community, despite her rocky start. She was known for her kindness and generosity, always ready to help a neighbor in need. She started a small lending library in her home, sharing her beloved books with anyone who wanted to read them. She taught her children and any other children who wanted to learn, believing as Thaddeus's mother had that education was the key to a better future. Thaddeus was a devoted husband and father, balancing the demands of running the ranch with the needs of his growing family. He taught William to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and was just as patient teaching Catherine and TJ when their time came. He never treated William any differently than his biological children, and as far as anyone in the family was concerned, they were all equally his. The incident from the church became a distant memory, something that had happened to different people in a different life. Reverend Michaels eventually moved away, replaced by a younger, more compassionate minister who treated everyone with kindness regardless of their past. Clarissa's father drank himself to death when William was 3, and while she grieved for the man he could have been, she felt mostly relief that he could no longer cause harm. Jacob Wilson, the man who had fathered William and then abandoned them, never came back to Shoshone City. Clarissa occasionally wondered what became of him, but it did not trouble her. He had missed out on knowing the wonderful boy William was becoming, and that was his loss, not theirs. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thaddeus surprised Clarissa with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had been to the ocean, and they stood on the beach holding hands while their children played in the surf, marveling at the vast expanse of water. "I told you once that I dreamed of seeing the ocean," Clarissa said, laughing as a wave splashed over her feet. "I cannot believe we are really here." "I want to give you all your dreams," Thaddeus said. "Everything you ever wanted." "You already have," Clarissa said, turning to look at him. At 38, he was even more handsome than he had been as a younger man, his face weathered by sun and wind but his eyes as kind and true as ever. "You gave me a home, a family, a life worth living. What more could I possibly want? How about 40 more years together?" Thaddeus suggested with a grin. "Only 40, Clarissa teased. "I was thinking more like 50. They kissed while their children squealed and splashed in the waves, and Clarissa thought about how far they had both come. From that desperate day in the church to this moment of perfect happiness, they had built something beautiful together. The journey back to Idaho was long but pleasant, filled with games and songs, and the easy camaraderie of a family that genuinely enjoyed each other's company. When they finally crested the rise that overlooked the Twin Pine Ranch, William, now 9 years old, pointed excitedly. "Look, there is home. Home." The word resonated through Clarissa. This place, this land, these people, they were her home in every way that mattered. She had been lost once, desperate and alone, but Thaddeus had found her. He had stood up when no one else would and offered her not just rescue but partnership, respect, and eventually love. As they rode down toward the ranch house, Clarissa saw Marcus and James emerge from the barn, waving in greeting. The house looked warm and welcoming, smoke rising from the chimney even though it was summer because Marcus believed in keeping a fire going for cooking. The garden she had planted so many years ago was lush and green, and the flower boxes she had installed were bursting with color. "Thank you," she said to Thaddeus as they dismounted. "For what?" he asked, helping Catherine down from her horse. "For being you," Clarissa said simply. "For standing up in that church and changing my life. For loving me and William and building this beautiful life with me." Thaddeus pulled her close, mindless of the children and ranch hands watching. "You changed my life too," he said. "I was just existing before you came. You taught me how to really live." That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Thaddeus and Clarissa sat on their porch as they had so many times before. Clarissa rested her head on his shoulder and looked up at the stars, thinking about all the nights they had spent like this, talking and dreaming and simply being together. "You ever think about that day?" Clarissa asked. "The day we met in the church, sometimes," Thaddeus admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding on by, to not going into the church at all. What would have happened to you if I had not been there?" "I do not like to think about it," Clarissa said with a shudder, "but I was thinking about it differently. I was thinking about how one moment can change everything. One choice, one act of courage or kindness, and suddenly everything is different." "You are right," Thaddeus said. "Standing up in that church and offering to marry you was the best decision I ever made. It changed both our lives for the better." "I used to be so angry at Jacob for leaving me," Clarissa confessed. "I hated him for making me promises he did not keep. But now I think maybe it was meant to happen that way. If he had married me, I never would have met you. I never would have had this life." "Everything worked out exactly as it was supposed to," Thaddeus agreed. "We found each other when we both needed it most." As the years continued to pass, the Twin Pine Ranch became one of the most successful operations in southern Idaho. Thaddeus and Clarissa's children grew into capable, kind adults who carried on the legacy their parents had built. William became a lawyer, using his education to help others the way his father had once helped his mother. Catherine married a neighboring rancher and had 5 children of her own. TJ took over the Twin Pine when Thaddeus eventually retired, running it with the same dedication and care his father had shown. Thaddeus and Clarissa grew old together, their hair turning silver, their hands becoming weathered and wrinkled, but their love only deepening with time. They became grandparents and then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and flourish. On warm summer evenings, they could still be found on their porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. "You have any regrets?" Clarissa asked one evening when they were both in their 70s. "Anything you wish you had done differently?" Thaddeus thought about it seriously, as he always did when she asked him important questions. "No," he said finally, "I would not change a single thing. Every choice, every moment led us here, to this life we built together. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same way," Clarissa said. "Even the hard parts, even the painful moments, they were all part of the journey, and the journey was worth it." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The ranch spread out before them, golden in the evening light, a testament to what could be achieved with hard work, determination, and love. The house behind them was full of memories, every room holding echoes of laughter and tears, of children growing and lives being lived. When Thaddeus passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Clarissa grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing they had made the most of every single day they had together. She lived for another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about the ranch and the man who had built it, the man who had stood up in a church all those years ago and changed her life with 4 simple words: "Then I will take her." On her own deathbed, with William holding one hand and Catherine holding the other, Clarissa looked back on her life with satisfaction and gratitude. She had gone from being a frightened, desperate girl to a woman who had known true love and built a legacy that would endure for generations. She had raised good children, loved a good man, and made a difference in her community. "Tell me the story again, Mama," Catherine said, squeezing her mother's hand. "About how you and Papa met." Clarissa smiled, her voice weak but steady. "I walked into a church desperate and alone, condemned by a judgmental man who saw only my mistakes. But your father, he saw something different. He saw someone worth saving, worth loving. He stood up when no one else would and offered me his hand and his heart. That was the day my real life began." "You loved him very much," William said. "It was not a question." "With everything I had," Clarissa confirmed. "And he loved me the same way. That is the greatest gift anyone can receive, to be truly loved wholly and completely for exactly who you are." "We will tell your story," Catherine promised, "so that our children and grandchildren know about the love you and Papa shared." "Tell them that love is not about where you start," Clarissa said, her eyes drifting closed. "It is about where you choose to go together. Tell them that one person standing up and doing the right thing can change the world. Tell them that broken things can be made whole again with patience and kindness." Those were the last words Clarissa Harper Parker spoke. She died peacefully that night, slipping away to join the man who had been her partner, her love, her home for more than 50 years. The story of their love became legend in Shoshone City, passed down through generations. The little church where they had married was torn down eventually and replaced with a larger building. But a plaque was mounted on the wall commemorating the day Thaddeus Parker had stood up for Clarissa Harper and changed both their lives forever. The Twin Pine Ranch continued to thrive under TJ's management, and eventually his children's, a living testament to what could be built on a foundation of love and mutual respect. And on warm summer evenings, if you stood on the porch of the old ranch house and listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of laughter and conversation, the sound of two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love story for the ages. It was a reminder that even in the hardest times, even when the world seems against you, one act of courage and compassion can change everything. Thaddeus had seen a woman in need and stepped forward when others turned away. Clarissa had accepted his offer with bravery and grace, trusting in the kindness of a stranger. Together, they had proven that love is not always about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it is about showing up, making a choice, and committing to build something beautiful one day at a time. Their story lived on not just in family legend but in the values they had instilled in their descendants: kindness over judgment, action over words, love over fear. Every child born into the Parker family heard the tale of how their great-great-grandparents had met, and they carried those lessons forward into their own lives. The ranch that Thaddeus had built and Clarissa had helped nurture continued to be a place of warmth and welcome, where hardship was met with helping hands and strangers were treated as friends. It became a reflection of the couple who had started it all, a place where second chances were given freely and love was the guiding principle. In the small cemetery on the edge of the Parker property, two headstones stood side by side under the shade of a massive pine tree. The inscriptions were simple: Thaddeus Marcus Parker, 1851–1933, beloved husband, father, and friend. He stood up when it mattered. Clarissa Harper Parker, 1858–1938, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She found home in his heart. Between them, carved into the base that connected the two stones, were the words that had started it all: "Then I will take her." Visitors to the cemetery often stopped to read those stones, to marvel at the dates that showed a marriage lasting over 50 years. Local historians told the story to tourists, painting a picture of the Old West that was not all gunfights and gold rushes, but also quiet acts of heroism and lasting love. The tale of Thaddeus and Clarissa Parker became more than just a family story. It became a parable about the power of choice, about standing up for what is right even when it is difficult, about the possibility of redemption and new beginnings. It reminded people that everyone deserves a second chance, that judgment and condemnation help no one, and that the greatest heroism is often found in simple acts of kindness. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the Twin Pine Ranch more than a century after Thaddeus first staked his claim to the land. The original house had been expanded and modernized, but the bones of it remained the same, and the porch where Thaddeus and Clarissa had spent so many evenings was preserved as a historical landmark. Couples came from all over to stand on that porch and have their photos taken, hoping to capture some of the magic that had existed there. The story of the preacher who said she was unfit to marry, and the rancher who stood up and said he would take her, lived on, a testament to the fact that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest romances start not with love at first sight, but with a simple decision to do the right thing. From that decision grew respect, from respect grew friendship, and from friendship grew a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. In the end, that was the real magic of Thaddeus and Clarissa's story. It was not a fairy tale where everything was perfect from the start. It was a real love story, messy and complicated and beautiful, built on a foundation of choice and commitment. They chose each other every single day, through good times and bad, through joy and sorrow, through the mundane moments and the extraordinary ones. And in doing so, they created something that would outlast them both, a legacy of love that would inspire generations to come. The Wild West of 1879 was a hard place, unforgiving and often cruel. But in that harshness, moments of grace shone all the brighter. Thaddeus Parker's decision to marry Clarissa Harper was one such moment, a light in the darkness, a reminder that even in difficult times, people can choose kindness, can choose love, can choose to stand up and make things right. And so their story ended not with tragedy or regret, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy that would continue to inspire long after they were gone. The ranch still stood, the family still thrived, and the memory of two people who had found each other against all odds continued to remind the world that love, real love, is worth fighting for.